Hey everybody, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is John with cookingwithjohngruber.com. I am going to spend today talking about the versatilities of ground beef. Now later in my series of YouTube videos, you will see me do several recipes containing ground beef. Now ground beef isn't necessarily something you can always squeeze into your budget. Like for example, this one here is $4.29 per pound. That's a little pricey for me. I have 2 pounds here, and my next video is going to contain one of the recipes that I came up with. But I have about 30 different recipes that I just whipped up off the top of my head. They include burgers, pizza, a beef and stout skillet pie, tacos, and those tacos, there could be several different varieties to them, meatballs, chili, meatloaf, bolognese sauce, lasagna, beef over rice, sloppy joes, shepherd's pie, barbecued beef, cabbage rolls, different types of soups, chilies. If I didn't mention chili, I should have. Spaghetti and meatballs definitely, like Swedish, meatball subs, etc. So many things you can do with that. Different types of rice bowls, which I've already mentioned. One of them being like a Thai basil and lemongrass rice bowl over rice, which is really tasty. Beef empanadas, stuffed zucchini, stuffed peppers, obviously. Now with the stuffed peppers, you can also make either a stuffed pepper soup or a stuffed pepper casserole, where you pretty much just chop up the pepper instead, and then that way you don't have to worry about stuffing it and baking it. You just mix everything together, throw it in the oven with the rice, the cooked rice, and the beef, and it is primo. So those are some of the different recipes that I came up with. Now, when I said burgers, there are different types of burgers you can make, obviously, different toppings. You can even glaze the burger patty while you are cooking it. Now when glaze the burger patty while you are cooking it. Now when making a burger out of fresh beef rather than buying frozen or pre-made, do not season the mixture. Season the outside. That'll give you a nice juicy burger on the inside, and the seasoning will toughen the proteins on the outside. So you'll have a nice burger shape. And always be sure to give a thumb dent to your burgers to make sure that they stay flat. Just kind of like a weird trick that, I don't know if you've ever made a homemade burger, but sometimes you make the patty nice and then you don't put that thumbprint in, it shrinks up and turns into like this hockey puck sized thing that doesn't fit in your butt. Now if that's your thing, stick with it, because there's nothing wrong with that. It's all about flavor, not necessarily presentation. Pizza. There are several different ways to make pizza. Now, one of the quick weeknight things that I like to do is I will just buy a quick pre-made dough, not boboli or pre-made shell, but a pre-made dough from the grocery store, as long as it's already thawed. They do sell them frozen too, and that will not work for a weeknight meal. But you can then just put your cooked hamburger on top, like maybe some ketchup and pickles or mustard and pickles, and that is your cheeseburger pizza. It's kind of fun. Just a quick tip for that. Now, I had mentioned a beef and stout pie. Really, that's using stewing beef, but you can also use the ground beef. You just put everything in your skillet, your onions, peppers if you want, carrots, celery, any type of vegetable that you wish to put in that cast iron skillet. You cook it, you cook everything right away, and then you put a frozen pie shell top over it, push it into the cast iron pan, toss it into the oven, and you have a sort of like a shepherd's pie, or even like a pot pie but it's all done in one skillet. Makes real easy, simple cooking technique. Now, again, this is just talking about what you can do with some ground beef. Tacos I mentioned. Okay, so tacos. Yes, you can do the traditional taco with the taco seasoning if you want. Now, I make my own taco seasoning because I don't like the amount of sodium that is in taco seasoning. Plus, it's not always gluten-free. Not that it matters to me, but that's something that I know a lot of people look for these days. One of the quickest ways to make a taco seasoning is just remember that it's made with cumin. So if you have ground cumin or cumin seed, you can just use that. And then it does contain some oregano, garlic powder. Am I missing anything? I don't really think so. I like mine spicy, so I do add red pepper flake. If you're looking for a thickening agent for your ground beef after you fried it, drained it, and it still kind of seems a little loose, you can always add some almond flour to thicken it up. That's just something that I picked up working with some almond flour over the years. Meatballs. Now meatballs, meatloaf, even, meatballs and meatloaf are the two things that I could say this about, is when you're mixing it, it's kind of all by feel and by taste. So there are like different recipes out there that kind of give you a little bit better of an example, but my theory behind like a meatloaf, for example, is it's just kind of what you have on hand, and you mix it up with the ground beef, and that's your seasoning, that's your flavor, and you just kind of make it to your taste. Not everybody likes a meatloaf that contains olives or hard-boiled eggs. I know some people do that too. I would, because I love olives, especially like roasted olives, so throw those in the meatloaf, absolutely. But I do have a recipe, and I will be showing you that next week, so stay tuned for the meatloaf recipe. Also, I'm going to be talking about a delicious cookbook that I've whipped together with a couple of friends of mine. It's 119 colorful pages with a couple of notes in there too. So you will like it. I did it in both imperial and metric. So you have the measurements depending on where you are. You have your measurements for the recipe. Whew, that was tough. Let's see. Okay, so chili. Chili is also one of those other ad-lib things. Some people like it spicy with jalapenos. Some people just want regular bell peppers in it. Some people don't want peppers at all. Now, I have found out that I have something within my digestive tract called the mild model bell pepper virus, which is just causes me some inflammation if I have green peppers. Now, I love bell peppers, so you know, you have to, where's the sacrifice? Like, do I have it or don't I have it? In my chili, I want peppers, I want tomatoes, I want onions, and I like it spicy. Definitely want beans in it as well. Beans are a great additive, protein additive on a budget as well. And you know I like beans because I'm full of beans. No. So yeah, that's that. Okay, so bolognese sauce. Tomato sauce is another thing that's kind of you don't need a recipe for. You have your tomato, like canned tomatoes, whether it be diced, crushed, whatnot. You can even cook down some Roma tomatoes or paste tomatoes. But if you're using paste tomatoes, be careful because they do cook down kind of thick. But with a bolognese sauce, that's perfect because you just cook your meat in your bolognese with your vegetables, and it's a nice thick sauce, hearty sauce. You can also just do like a basic tomato sauce with the over spaghetti or something, and that basic tomato sauce can also be used with the meats in a lasagna. So I know some people like the meat separate from the sauce in their lasagna. I say go for the whole shebang. Mix the sauce with the meat. You get a nice layer of flavor within, and then you're not getting that weird questionable meats within lasagna. That's one of the things. Speaking of lasagna, I have just discovered something called plantain lasagna. So it's a seasoned beef. There is no tomato sauce in that, but it contains, instead of a pasta sheet layer, it uses sliced plantains, like lengthwise, in that production of lasagna. And I'm going to try that, let you know what I think about it later on. I mentioned shepherd's pie, very similar to that beef and stout pie, only you're topping it with tomato or mashed potatoes. Usually shepherd's pie is made with leftovers, leftover lamb, leftover beef, leftover pork, whatever you can find. It's all ground up, chopped up in a delicious gravy with carrots, maybe peas, again celery, if you want to add celery. I have done it several times in several different ways. I like to use a gravy starter for that when I'm making my gravy, but I will make a homemade gravy in there, so I won't go out and buy it. And I never, ever, ever use jarred gravy. Ugh, it's terrible. Cabbage rolls. So I so happen to have a head of cabbage here. Now, cabbage rolls, or guamki, halupkis, whatever you might call them, stuffed cabbage is another thing. You cook the rice, you kind of steam up the cabbage, and then you have leaves to work up with, and roll them up, and then bake them up in the oven. It's a great recipe if you like it. I'm lazy. I don't like making individual things. If you've ever noticed any of my videos, or even look at most of my recipes, none of them contain like individual like appetizer or hors d'oeuvre style things, because I don't like to do that. I want to make one big sheet of something and maybe cut it up small, but I don't really want to do that. So that is where a cabbage roll soup comes into play. You just chop your green cabbage, cook up your meat, and then add some tomato broth, and that is and some rice, and that is the secret to the cabbage roll soup. Now, when you make the rice for anything, check out my other YouTube video, because if you're going to make stuffed peppers, usually contains rice. If you make the stuffed cabbage rolls, you are going to want to have a firmer rice. You don't want it to be too mushy. Check out my how to make rice perfectly video here on YouTube. It'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. The rice comes out al dente, not too mushy, and it'll mix better in your recipe. Is there anything that I missed on this list? Stuffed zucchini boats. Obviously, cut the zucchini in half. If there are big seeds, I'd say scoop them out and throw the beef mixture on top, and that can be any style you want. So if you want Greek seasonings, if you want like taco seasonings, go for it. If you wanted Italian seasonings, if you just want it plain, if you wanted sloppy joe, barbecue, do whatever. Zucchini will accept all the flavors, and it makes for a great light dinner. Thai basil lemongrass rice bowl, or rice bowls in general. Ground beef makes a great topping for rice and pasta, period. So you have the versatility of going any directions you want. Like, you could do a Korean rice bowl if you wanted, and that's with the beef. You can do Thai. If you don't want to do, if you want to keep it low carb, I will tell you something that I've done several times, is you fry up your beef, you add a little bit of peanut butter, soy sauce, and fish sauce, some ginger too, some fresh ginger maybe. Fry that up, you get kind of like a nice sticky meat mixture. It's still going to have your ground beef, and then you also have and then you just layer it on a piece of romaine, and you've made kind of like a lettuce boat. You can also use cabbage and roll it up into a cabbage that way too. And it's best to use like a nice fresh cabbage so it's crisp. Otherwise, it's kind of going to be chewy. I do like to eat cabbage raw as well. So that's one of those recipes that is wonderful in there. Again, if you want to make it spicy, add some Thai peppers, add some red pepper flake, whatever you want. There are so many options with ground beef. I can't believe I'm talking about ground beef like this. This is amazing. So I mentioned the stuffed peppers, the stuffed zucchini boats, the rice bowl. Homemade hamburger helper. Do not buy the box of hamburger helper. Buy egg noodles. fry up your meat in a package of what is it, like Knorr's instant French onion soup mix. Now don't make the mix, don't really add water, just toss it right into your hamburger. Perfect. Maybe if you want to add a little Parmesan cheese, go right ahead, stir that in with some egg noodles. You have hamburger helper, but homemade, and it's not so sodium wise, and you can feed more people with it. Okay, you can just get more out of it. I mean, say that little tiny box, like half box of pasta with like a packet of something, and you still have to add your ground beef. So you maybe paid $1 for that box, but you're also paying the, let's see, $4.29 for the pound of hamburger meat that you're putting in there, and that really doesn't feed that many people, especially hungry people. Okay. I'm going to stop there. I talked a lot about it. I've got to get onto a recipe. It will not include cabbage. Most people don't like cabbage, so I'm going to try and steer away from cabbage. Although cabbage is wonderful because it's also a cheap ingredient to have on hand at all times. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next week with one of the recipes I mentioned.